The biggest problem with current generation high-end GPUs doesn't just come down to price, and this Galax EX Gamer 4070 Ti is the perfect example of this. Let me show you. Developed by the same company that makes the outrageous Hall of Fame cards, it gets 200 frames in Shadow, nearly 100 frames in Hogwarts Legacy, all while remaining under 70 degrees on the core in the most brutal of torture tests. Essentially, this card performs as a 4070 Ti should, staying cool and quiet while doing so. But just look at the sheer size of it. And funnily enough, this is a very average size compared to other 4070 Ti's on the market. But while I was going through the process of reviewing this card, I noticed something that makes this specific version from Galax inconspicuously special. These 6 screws. And because of them, you are now watching this video from an entirely different perspective. Let me explain. 6 screws, 3 cables, and 10 minutes of your time is all it takes to go from this to this, making the Galax EX Gamer one of the easiest cards I've seen in years to deshroud, modify, and mount custom designed 3D printed models to, which is exactly what we're going to do today. I'm going to show you what you get with this card, its features and performance, before we then replace the stock fans with our own custom solution, and see if the process of deshrouding or modding GPUs for better compatibility and performance is back, or if it's just another cool thing that's probably not worth the effort. Let's find out. So you're thinking about an upgrade, but prices are holding you back. Well, there's 2 ways that I can help you out with that. You can either offset the cost by selling what you currently own, or even make your upgrade more affordable with today's video sponsor, Jawa. Jawa is an online marketplace specifically designed for gamers by gamers, where users and listings are pre-approved to make sure that buyers are not being taken advantage of and prices are fair, which I think we can all get behind. But what if you want to make money instead? Well, sellers can also benefit in a number of ways. Jawa takes a smaller fee compared to eBay, and will even outright buy your graphics card from you if you need a quicker, hassle-free sale. But these are only my favourite features of the platform. They also have a vibrant community, commission builds, and a 4.7 Trustpilot rating. So what are you waiting for? Make your next upgrade more affordable by clicking on the Jawa sponsor link below. So what I'm going to do is set my Ender 5 S1 off to print, which I didn't think about that door, as we're going to need a few parts a bit later on, for when we get to the custom stuff. But while that's printing, what we should do is take a look at this card from a stock perspective and understand who it's made for in a typical situation. So let's see what you get and start with the unboxing, for which you first need to get past what I can only describe as hacker cyborg dude. But once you figure out an arrangement with Anonymous, you're of course granted access to the card, plus a 2x8 to 16 pin power adapter, like with all 4070 Ti's so far. You also get an RGB cable, more on that in a bit, and a basic GPU support bracket, which is nice to see. It does a pretty good job. But the thing that stands out the most about this card's design so far is the color scheme. There's a pink and grey, black and white, and black with grey backplate, which we have here, and is my editor's preferred option, as he uses the ASRock Steel Legend motherboard. The grey allows for a very nice aesthetic flow within the colour scheme. Another interesting observation are these contacts through the slot in the backplate. I can't say for sure without testing it, but Galax offers a GPU backplate fan for other models, which may also be compatible with this, and could make a big difference in cooling other components if you have an otherwise challenging airflow situation. But let's go back to the RGB before we take a look at performance. The only RGB on this card is the GeForce RTX logo. There is nothing on the back of it, and also nothing on the front, for those of you looking to vertically mount your GPU. But you can extend the RGB with the cable that we unboxed earlier, and we saw something similar with the ASRock 7900 XTX Phantom Gaming, and I was concerned that the RGB output port is unlabeled, and the same goes here. So please do not go plugging your motherboard or RGB input device into this port. It is specifically for outputting RGB to strips, fans, stuff like that. There should be some sort of electrical protection on the port, but relying on that as a failsafe is not a great way to implement a feature, which goes for both the ASRock and the Galax card. But I prefer the stability of this solution, even though it's a non-typical connector for the GPU side. So as the 3D print is finishing up, we should probably see what the performance is like stock, before we see if we can beat Galax at their own game. At stock, this card performs as you would expect. There isn't a Founders Edition model to compare against, and I'm actually more interested to see how this card performs against itself when we get to the custom stuff. So what we should do is get some baseline figures with Galax's new 1440p 165Hz G-Sync IPS monitor. That's now my primary gaming display. I didn't actually know that Galax make monitors and mice, but I've been enjoying using them, so check them out below. But in terms of the EX Gamer GPU, well, a 30-minute Fairmark run had this card at 69 degrees average and 81 degrees max on the hotspot, with the memory never going above 60 degrees. It's almost like these cards were designed for another crypto boom, and overclocking seems to support this theory. Plus 500, okay, plus 1,000. 1,500? Hang on, 2,000 megahertz on the memory, and the card didn't even notice, and 200 megahertz on the core, making this Galax EX Gamer I have one of the better 4070 Ti overclockers I've tested, and gives us a reasonably generous boost to performance, especially those 1% lows. But unless stated otherwise, all of these tests are run in a controlled environment, on a test bench, with no other impedance from a case, for example. And although most current generation GPUs will likely fit in most mid-towers, that isn't always the case, and especially for small form factor enthusiasts. Something like my N-Case M1 was designed for normal sized GPUs, and while I was trying to shove a sausage into a keyhole, I saw that to get this guy to fit, all that it would take was removing 6 screws from the front, and the entire fan assembly comes off with your warranty intact, which took me back to one of my older builds, the Node 202. One of the special things about that case was that you could attach normal fans directly in front of the GPU to assist with airflow. But how the community and modders took this one step further is by either deshrouding a large GPU, the process of removing the fan and the faceplate assembly, or by replacing the cooler altogether, which is exactly what I did for my 1060. But either way, the solution was typically designed and implemented to allow bigger, better fans to replace the smaller ones on your GPU. But why would you want to do this? Well, the answer is actually threefold. Number 1, bigger fans move more air at the same speed, which is better for cooling. Number 2, bigger fans make less noise with a better sound profile when moving the same volume of air, which is just better for living with the system. And number 3, well, maybe not everyone agrees, but there's something industrious about a deshroud that looks a lot better than what some companies pay thousands of dollars on R&D for. So let's see if we can shave a section off this sausage, and if doing so gives us better performance, for which I think this 3D print has just completed. Let's take a look. So there's 2 things that we need to figure out to make this solution work. Number 1 is powering the fans in a way that allows the GPU to be able to control them, independent of everything else in the system. And number 2 is physically mounting the fans by some means that isn't going to be detrimental to performance, because that can happen, which gives us 2 options. We can either find a way to directly attach the fans to the GPU cooler, which can be as simple as some cable ties or as complex as some mounting adapters, and has the benefit of being right up against the heatsink. Alternatively, if there are intake fans directly in front of your card, like we have, they can be the easiest way to secure the fans for the GPU, but there's benefits both ways. Having them attached to the GPU will likely be the only solution for some of you and will work extremely well if you have plenty of room below the card. But attaching them to the case can get you closer to that fresh air source and remove the turbulence below the fan. But any gap between the fan and the cooler can hinder the air from effectively making its way through the fins. Which brings us on to the reason why this guy has made an appearance. Let me show you. What I figured out in my situation is that the GPU fits perfectly in this case, almost unnaturally well, but standard 25mm fans leave us with a pretty large gap that's going to allow for air to leak out before it can make its way between the fins and cool the card. But then I remembered I have some of these. These are Arctic Bionics P120 ARGB fans, and although I fell in love with their price and performance, one of the biggest issues I highlighted in my review was that they are 20% thicker than most case fans, and could cause compatibility issues with radiators, for example. But by swapping in these thicker 30mm fans, we've managed to get as close as realistically possible for this mod, and will likely be good enough for most people in this situation. But I've kind of gotten a reputation of taking things a bit too far, in a good way. So to assist with the rest of the gap, we have 3D printed this shroud piece to better channel the air through the heatsink. 3D printers are an excellent addition to anyone who wants to try any type of PC modding, or even make figurines for your build. But there's a few things to consider before you invest in one. You want to get a printer that is designed to print ABS plastic. PLA starts softening at about 60 degrees, and a melty mod is a bad mod. And you'll also want a decent sized build bed for decreasing the amount of parts necessary, which is why I chose the Ender 5 S1 that I'm now using I had the 5 Pro before this, but this version is an upgrade in every sense and has been a pleasure to use. So if you're looking for an excellent all-rounder at a good price, I'll have this linked down below with my CAD files for this mod. It's very simply 2 parts that interlock between one another, and we can just glue them together. This then becomes a bracket for helping the air channel through the heatsink, and let's add this aesthetic piece to hide the seam. Perfect. And once we attach it, I am super happy with how this turned out. Let me know what you guys think down below the like button. But while you do that, you may have realized that we have only figured out 1 out of our 2 problems, and the second is powering these fans in a way that makes sense. You could plug them into your motherboard, but you likely won't be able to control them based on GPU thermals, and controlling the GPU fans based on CPU temps, for example, is not a good solution. So to fix that, you could go for a separate controller like this Commander Pro. One of its features is that you can set up custom fan curves based on a wide array of thermal sensors in your system. This would be especially easy for me as we already have one installed. But the problem with that is that the fan control software always needs to be running, polling those sensors, which isn't ideal. If it crashes or doesn't start up, your GPU will not be able to cool itself. Which brings us onto the better solution. These adapters. Fortunately, most GPUs come with the same style of connector and can easily be adapted to a standard 4-pin PWM fan header. This solution isn't perfect and does come with some quirks that I'll show you in a bit, but gives the GPU the ability to directly control those intake fans, meaning we don't have to worry about the fans not running when needed. So with those installed and the GPU sausage perfectly slotted into the system, I'm genuinely excited to boot it up and see what kind of improvement this has made to our thermals. So let's talk performance and figure out what the real world impact is for this D-Shroud and the quirks that come with it. Starting out with our stress test, which originally shows some rather alarming results, with the D-Shroud performing significantly worse than stock, about 10 to 15%. But the thing to remember here is that by putting the GPU into a case, especially this case, we've dramatically altered the operating environment, and things that need cooling do not like to be suffocated by a solid object an inch away from it. So to better match the TestBench setup, I reran the tests with the case on its side, which still isn't as free-flowing as a TestBench, but is a more accurate comparison, and doing so produced these results, which is an improvement, but only by a few percent. However, the most interesting part of this graph is something you might not expect. Let me show you. Do you see something wrong or misleading about the fan speed? Because it looks pretty normal, right? I'm clearly matching fan speed percent to remain consistent in testing, but that percentage is the GPU lying to us, and I can prove it by showing you the RPM figures. What we have actually done in these tests is match the fan speed, not the percentage. And we can conclude 2 things from this. Number 1, the max speed of the fans that Galax include for this card is clearly over 3000 RPM. But as per Arctic specs, the Bionics only goes up to 2300, which means the percentage number for the D-Shroud doesn't mathematically work, and suggests that the GPU is reporting percentage based on hard-coded values that Galax have implemented, which is not an issue at all. But the quirk of this mod means that full fan speed with the Bionics attached is actually in the 60% range when controlling the fan speed through something like MSI Afterburner. So bear that in mind. But how do these improvements affect gameplay? Well, as you've probably guessed it, a couple percent thermal difference leads to pretty much identical performance, as in within run-to-run variance. We could go further and test more types of configurations, but so far, that was a lot of effort for little reward. So does that mean it's entirely worthless to do something like this? And if it isn't, should you do it? Well, in a situation like my small form factor gaming system, this was the difference between being able to use the card and not. In fact, this is a performance comparison between being able to install the GPU and not being able to, which admittedly is a little bit silly, but you get the point. Plus, I'm going to add a couple extra points for a unique aesthetic, but for most people, probably not worth it. However, this Galax EX Gamer 4070 Ti has been a pleasure to use. And if you ever wanted to do something like this or get really crazy with something custom, those 6 screws are the true MVP of this card. And I'll have everything that I used in this video linked below for you, if you want to check it out. But what if you're looking for something other than a 4070 Ti? What card provides the best value for gamers right now? Well, check out the GPU value playlist. One of the most popular videos is our best GPUs to buy right now series, where we break down every GPU you can buy and evaluate their value based on performance. And you can check that out by clicking here. Otherwise, guys, share, like, subscribe. They are always appreciated. And I hope you have an amazing day.